Hello and welcome. My name is Carol Carter and I'm the founder and CEO of Global Minded. We are in the middle of our 10-week virtual conference, and we are all about opportunities in education for first gen to college, underrepresented students, and diverse students from all backgrounds. We define diversity very, very liberally, and we are all about getting those students connected to role models, mentors, internships, and jobs. And we do that in a number of ways. In addition to the annual conference every year, we also have Global Minded summer bridge programs. We have college collaborative programs at different campuses. And we have first gen leadership classes. So last year's class in June had 102 students. This year, we're accepting applications right now. And because it's virtual, we can have several hundred students participate in the third week of June lineup of programming. So, and the final thing we do is we have something called the Inclusive Leader Awards. And this is across 14 sectors. We really believe that until diverse leaders become household names, the way movie stars and sports stars are household names, we're not going to see diversity where we need to on college campuses or in foundations and funders or in business. So that is another piece of our strategy to show those incredible leaders. And today we are so thrilled to have our Native American inclusive leaders here. And it's my great pleasure to introduce Dr. David Yarlott, who is the president of Little Bighorn College, and he's an alumnus of the Student Support Services area at Montana State University in Bozeman, which is a beautiful area, and actually all of Montana, incredible. But President Yarlott attended Montana State University in Bozeman from 1989 to 1994 as an undergraduate student in business management. And he had some previous college experience, but as a new student at MSU, wasn't so prepared for the large campus, the large classes, and the increased demands academically. The unexpected changes were overwhelming. So I read that part of the story because I want him to expand on that, but that is why Global Minded exists, because only 11% of first gen to college graduated from college pre-COVID, and we know those numbers have made so much worse since the multiple measure pandemics of the last year. So David, it is my pleasure to introduce you and your incredible panel, and looking forward to hearing the rest of your story of how you experienced college and how that informed your passion and purpose in becoming a college president. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you, Carol. Thank you for that introduction. I will say that when I was completing my undergrad, I tested the job market. And what I found was that what I wanted to receive in a salary wasn't what was offered out in the community. So I started looking at the graduate programs, master's in business education. And once I got into the master's program, I was already starting to think about a PhD program or a doctoral program. And when I completed my master's and started on my doctoral program, Montana State University was lauded for doing great things for indigenous people, stating that here is a program that has 30 some indigenous students in a graduate program, when typically across the nation there's only 30 nationally. And shortly after that, about a month later, then Montana State University's Department of Ed program was being investigated, audited, stating that if there's so many Native students in this program, then the program must be inferior. So from that point, many of my colleagues either rushed trying to get their degree programs completed, or they simply dropped out. And then the number of students went on a class action suit against the university. I was asked if I wanted to join in on a class action suit. And while I was contemplating whether I wanted to join or not, one of my friends and colleagues, good friend that was on my committee, approached me and stated, you know, David, you could probably join in a class action suit. You might win, but it may take 5 years. But what if after 5 years, you don't win, you're right back where you're at? And look at it this way. You're either the right person or the wrong person to pick on, depending on the perspective or the view that the individual is looking at. And he said, bite the bullet and take the challenge. And that's exactly what I did. And at that point, they also had me change my entire committee at that point, and I ended up basically losing 18 credits because some of the course that I had already taken weren't going to be considered as part of my program. So from that point on, it's something that I've continued to do, being brought up by my parents to continue to serve in some capacity. My mother babysat while we went through school. So we grew up helping take care of people. So that's what I've continued to do, even in my current capacity. With that, I'm going to go ahead and pass it on to Dr. Billy Joe Kipp, if you want to share a little bit about yourself.
Thank you, President Yarlott. Good morning, everybody, or afternoon. I'm Dr. Billy Kipp. I'm enrolled Blackfeet from the Blackfeet Reservation in Montana. I now reside in Seattle. Currently, I'm the Associate Director for Research and Evaluation at the Center for Native American Youth, but did kind of a long stunt as a tribal college president for Blackfeet Community College for 6 years and California Tribal College for 1 year. I'm very excited to be here and have an opportunity to talk about our students gaining access to higher education, but also our students' barriers to higher education. And some of them you might not be aware of. So I think it's critically important. As a clinical psychologist by education and training, I've investigated mental health in Indigenous communities, and I've been a clinician for over 20 some years and a research professor at the University of New Mexico. And I've been very fortunate to be able to look at the mental health of our youth. I'm trained as a child psychologist and very, very interested in those kinds of difficulties that our youth struggle with. And that when they step in the door of a higher education organization, they are coming with a lot of difficulties. And how we meet those difficulties, the tribal college movement has really been very keen in that and very prescriptive and very cultural. And those cultural interventions are significant for our youth to attain balance, but also for our youth to move through higher education. And that's something we do very, my colleague there, Dr. Yarlott and Dr. Baker do an extremely well job of putting together culturally informed curriculum, culturally responsive interventions, and that enhances our learning because the education has not been something that has been attainable for us. In fact, many of our elders still say they're going to do something to you if you get educated, they're going to hurt you. And so we come from that residual effects of boarding school. So being a clinical psychologist, having skills in research, having skills in administration has really afforded me options to really provide support and provide new programming for our youth. Right now, I'm coming to you and I'm not hiding my background from Cheyenne River Youth Project, where we're doing a Native youth leadership training. And we've come to find through our research and our evaluations and our Indigenous methods that Native leadership looks quite different for youth than it does from mainstream folks. And so I'm very excited about that. I'm very excited to be amongst my colleagues again And I welcome the opportunity to discuss these issues further. Thank you, President Yarlott.
Thank you, Dr. Kipp. We'll turn to Dr. Joseph Gladstone. If you want to share a little bit about yourself.
Okay, I'm Joe Gladstone. I am enrolled in the Blackfeet tribe. I'm also a descendant of the Nez Perce tribe on my mother's side. I am actually coming to you from the Multnomah, Wasco, Cowlitz country down here on the Columbia River in Vancouver, Washington, just across from Portland, on my great road trip of 2021 right now. I'm an assistant professor at the University of New Haven. My background is my PhD is in business administration. So my interest is explores the intersection of Native culture and business. Where does business fit within Native communities? And that's my great curiosity. I got into this line of work because I actually had worked in public health. I hold a Master of Public Health degree, and I had worked in tribal health for a tribe in Arizona and also in Seattle, where I was born and raised. And then fortunately, as many find who have graduate degrees in Indian country find that if you have a graduate degree, you'll be very likely detailed to do more work than you're originally hired to do. And that's because your education is highly valued. And so I was placed on a committee for the Indian Health Service that gave me an opportunity to travel throughout the nation. And in my work, I discovered that I was treating the symptom of an economic problem, that diabetes and other social issues and health issues in Indian country is directly related in a lot of ways to the health problems that exist within, related to the economic problems that exist within Indian country. And so I decided that it would be better for me to attack the economic problems rather than just the symptoms of those problems in health. And I went into becoming a business professor. I'm one of the very few American Indian business professors in the United States that actually explores business from an Indigenous view. And so that's what my work is currently looking at now, looking at where business fits within Indigenous cultures and how we can use business to bring us up from our current situation. That's my current story right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Gladstone. Dr. Carma, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yate, good afternoon. I am Dr. Carma Claw. I am assistant professor at Fort Lewis College here in Durango, Colorado, in the School of Business Administration. I teach strategy and business ethics. So that is a new start for me. This is my second year here at Fort Lewis. And as Joe said, we are a handful when it comes to business professors. So I know Joe because he is my mentor for many years now. And he was my first connection when I was looking for a doctoral program. And so I've been lucky to have him as a mentor through all these years. I am Shebit Ani Nishlido Kitlachini Bashichin Kia Ani Dashachedo Ashche Dashanala Ado E Anath Utah do E Yasinasha Ado Yasi Shananish in Sinigik Ade AI what the whole Altragi Shananish go Shahot Ako Aya in Shahan Kidini Dolel. So these are my clans. I am I'm Navajo. From the Utah portion of Navajo territory. So that's where I grew up. I graduate from the White Horse High School there on the reservation, and then pursued higher education, and really have not quite been this close to home in such a long time. So I'm happy to be here at Fort Lewis. And my early introduction to business was through my sister and her husband starting the first fully Navajo-owned business in our hometown. And so I got introduced at a very young age, answering phones and doing payroll, doing those calculations. And so that business background really is through my educational and professional. I also have 17 years of industry experience in 2 top flight defense companies. And so that was my professional experience. And so then later on, when as we talk in my ethics class, values do change over time. And so my original intention of way back when I wanted to go graduate school was kind of, gnawing at my memory. And so I then began to look at different options that I could go into. And I came full circle back to business and decided to, after making a connection with Joe, after several years of searching for a program that might fit my desires for a graduate program, I made the connection with Joe, and then immediately, that was a quick transition back into graduate school, and got me into New Mexico State University, which is where my doctoral program was. And I'm happy to now discuss from an educator in higher education standpoint now, teaching at a business school. And I'm so happy to join you all and make so many new connections here today. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Dr. Claw. Next is Dr. Twyla Baker. Can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Dosha Maranako. Had a little bit of technical difficulty there. I had to switch up really quick, but that such is the life of a tribal college president. You just adapt and keep going. Well, good afternoon, relatives. It's nice to be here with everybody. And I'm speaking to you from my ancestral homelands. I am the president of Nueta Hidatsa Sahnish College, located on the Fort Berthold Indian Reservation in Northwest North Dakota. And I've been president here for about 7 years. And I am actually an alumni of the institution as well. And I'm the first president that's actually younger than the institution now. That kind of speaks to how relatively new TCUs are in the realm of higher education. So my journey started years ago here in Newtown. I've come full circle. I'm back home on my home reservation, Fort Berthold, where I was born and raised. And I left here for several years and went to institutions on the West Coast, and then out to the University of North Dakota, where I ended up getting my my doctoral degree. And I worked there for over a decade at the university. And my background is kind of covers a big swath of different things. I started out in STEM. I have a bachelor's degree in environmental geology and technology, and a master's in education, and a doctoral degree in teaching and learning, research methodology. So I ended up working at the university at the School of Medicine. The Center for Rural Health was home to me, and that was where the National Resource Center on Native American Aging was. And I spent a lot of time crunching numbers, doing reports, traveling to DC, doing advocacy work and that type of thing. And then in 2013, I think it was, I got a phone call from one of my mentors, Alice Spotted Bear. A position had opened up at our institution here to be the Dean of Students. And she knew that I was an incredibly freshly minted doctorate from our tribe. So I was like, literally, I think I got across the stage and she was trying to give me a job offer. So it was great to have that type of support. She knew what that capacity needed to be built here on our home reservation. And she made a pathway for me to be able to come home and bring my family here. And I've been here ever since. Alice passed on in 2014, actually. And that was an entire experience in and of itself. It was very sudden. However, we carry on her legacy and doing the work. It almost makes it more poignant that she was recruiting me while she was ill. And I'm a very spiritual person, and I believe that there's purpose in all things. So I'm here doing a lot of heart work with the TCU and with my colleagues across the country. We worked very well together. We have a louder voice when we work together, and we get to do, a lot of different things across many different spheres, one of them being here and speaking with all of you. So it's great to be here. I am looking forward to a good, rich dialogue.
Thank you, Dr. Baker. We're going to go next to a global-minded, every learner, everywhere student ambassador, Dominik, MorningDove. Can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about yourself?
Hi, I'm Dominik MorningDove. I am from San Felipe Pueblo, New Mexico, and currently go to school at Fort Lewis College, pursuing a double major in psychology and music. I have a very wide range of interests, but as of right now, I've been delving pretty far into the political sciences, international relations, and leadership, peace, negotiation strategy, things like that. And I feel like this will be a good experience for me to get input from other leaders in our community.
Thank you, Dominik. I have been real fortunate, and I don't know how fortunate I became when I got selected to lead this panel. As mentioned, I'm the president of Little Bighorn College. I've been the president here for 19 years, serving as the American Indian Higher Education Consortium Board Chair, going on 5 years now. I've had the pleasure of working with the 37 tribal colleges across the nation. As we all know, we've gone through changes throughout time. And this past year has been something that has been, unprecedented, something that have provided us with challenges that we've never faced before. Some of our communities have suffered more than others, but however, we have all been impacted by COVID. And with that, we've gone through shutdowns in certain areas, quarantining, the rollout of the vaccine shots, the changes in the guidelines of masking, and then also how we live, how it impacted how we live. Accessing food, supplies, and how do we go about getting these things to our communities. And now we're going into a different phase of reopening. How are we going to go about doing that? So with that, we're going to go into some conversation where I'm going to ask some questions, and hopefully our esteemed guests here will provide what their thoughts are. So I'm going to start off with the first question, and it's open to anyone. So first question is, what are the greatest challenges you have seen for our community during COVID?
Hi, David. If you don't mind, I'd like to start with that. I think it's incredibly important for mainstream America to understand that tribes live with challenges all the time. The only thing that COVID did is it illuminated and amplified those challenges. And quite frankly, the other thing that it did is it really showed the disparity around access to quality health care, broadband for our youth, and mental health services. So when we look at the challenges of tribal colleges and tribal communities, the challenges are those that have always been there. We're severely underfunded. We live in isolated areas. We pull together programs to feed our people. And so in those communities, when you're a tribal college president or you're an administrator, you're constantly thinking of ways for people to have their basic needs met. So the COVID right now just illuminated what Native folks and tribes have been very aware of, is we've been victims of pandemics for centuries. We've been victims of biological warfare for centuries under government policies. And so, really, it's been an opportunity for the tribes to really say, you know, this is new to everybody else, but this is Tuesday for us, right? Because we constantly are isolated and lack access to resources. I think of on my reservation and the change to broadband. Many of our youth could not sign on to even their grade school because my granddaughter's on the reservation and I have grandkids on the reservation. And they were eliminated because the broadband didn't work. And my granddaughter tells me, Grandma, one day this young guy, and she's 10, she said, he was yelling at his uncles who were fighting because there's 4 or 5 families in the house where they're trying to teach. So what has happened for tribal communities is we've been denied access for education, but our youth have been denied access for relief from trauma in the home, from substance abuse in the home, and from connection to the school system that provides them with that relief. I'm very concerned at this point as a clinical psychologist. I foresee, and it's the statistics say that our youth nationally, I think I read just today, 60% increase in mental health disorders with older youth, 29% increase in younger, 12 and unders. We had a 12-year-old girl suicide on our reservation recently. So we've got to be very explicit. We've got to be very very large advocates. And we got to move forward because what happened is we were marginalized further than we have been. And we were already marginalized. So I see profound effects, but I also see opportunities for us to get our narrative out there and for America to realize what our needs are, because it's been highlighted in other cultures. It's been always in our culture. So thank you for that opportunity, David.
Thank you, Dr. Kipp.
I'll jump in on this now. I guess everyone, yeah, I'm unmuted. So when I first you heard the question, it's like the challenges we've seen for our communities. It's very important to remember, that Indian country is very large, very diverse. And so challenges are very subjective. Each community has unique challenges that are related to their geography, their access to care that's actually oftentimes related to geography, and economics, and amongst many other things. And so what Dr. Kipp just shared is a classic example of those challenges. We have issues with media, what kind of information we get, and especially in this modern day, with broadband access, we have children who are attempting to learn in this new technological age where, for example, I'm on the road and I'm communicating with you, but this is an advantage I have, and it's not an advantage others have. So it's a great challenge that we face in terms of just this access to modern day education strategies. And then another thing, besides just the technology that we have, these challenges, speaking as a business professor who looks at economies and workforce, and I don't want to sound dispassionate about this, But we do, a lot of communities lost a lot of people. So there's an impact to the workforce that exists. We have now, we'll have a lot younger people being needed to fill in these roles that need to be served in each community. And so it's something that we need to keep in mind as we recover, that we'll have a lot more of the youth carrying a lot of the weight to help us recover from this pandemic. So those are the key things that I see challenges within the communities throughout the USA.
Thank you, Dr. Gladstone. Dr. Baker, can I get a perspective from your end as tribal college?
Sure thing. I think, at least speaking from the perspective of an MHA tribal member, MHA being Mandan, Hidatsa, and Rikra Nation, the pressure that was put onto our behavioral health systems here was enormous and will continue to be, because people are dealing with displaced grief, basically. We didn't really have time to deal with the losses that were happening because they were so very rapid, and we would have to deal with another loss within weeks or even days in some cases here. From personal experience, we had 3 cousins and an uncle pass in one family, and that was within 1 month. So the mental health capacity, never mind the pressures of raising kids, of trying to homeschool kids at the same time, taking on college classes, the quick switch to online delivery, and having to learn all of that stuff at an incredibly rapid pace. That's going to take a toll on anyone. I do want to highlight, however, the adaptability and the care that the Native community displayed, particularly our leadership, and how rapidly they responded. And that was great to see. It's unfortunate what had to happen to bring it around. But the losses of people themselves, that was probably the biggest impact here. And then when we're talking about loss of human life, we're also talking about loss of elders, loss of language, cultural knowledge. It is as if a library burns every time an elder passes within our communities. And they are basically the keepers of our traditional knowledge, of our identities, and it's tragic every time one passes. And I think we're all aware of the fact that the disease impacted us inordinately, and we lost so many people. I don't know, I can't even think of all that many people that weren't impacted directly within our communities. So that in itself is something that you can't necessarily measure.
Thank you, Dr. Baker. Dr. Claw, you want to go ahead and respond to the question?
Yes, thank you for all those insights. When I was thinking about this, I just was, I guess, just thinking about viewing this as the largest disruption in the education system in our history. Schools around the world shut down overnight and closed doors to all students, and really reconnecting that to our Native communities, and where we're already faced with so much hardship due to systemic issues, and having to adapt to this new phenomenon was certainly a huge challenge, and has been stark and significant in everyone's lives. And so as mentioned the highlighted existing foundational equities really was pretty stark, even from, the standpoint of the digital divide. So having classes not in session for so many students and a swift and abrupt change severely impacted them in terms for me from a mental health standpoint. And so that was really my focus in thinking about this but it wasn't just in school. It's been in all spaces where we've been social. So that social fabric that built our communities was so heavily impacted in our ability to be a community, because as natives, that's what we draw to. We have our ceremonies, we have our spiritual events, we have our feasts, we have our time together as families. And so withdrawing us from that environment where we're comfortable, where we have structure, where we know what some things are expected of us, really impacted our ability to adapt. But we did in a lot of ways. And so that's where I kind of see a lot of resilience in our communities, being able to then transition to social and virtual environments in a lot of spaces where we're able to find some of that support that was taken because we couldn't do that social interaction. And so humans in general are not keen or great with uncertainty, and these disrupted routines really added a lot of stress and anxiety in all spaces of all ages of people. And so when I was thinking about the students, that's what it was coming to. The parents, how are they now adapting because their children are home? Where's the next meal going to come from? In the loss of financial assets and so forth. And so all areas of our human existence just was significantly impacted, and the totality of it all happening at once was kind of the overarching challenge in this case. So from all of the external environment, the social and political unrest, the stark differences in our society leading to our nation's turmoil, the economic impacts of job loss and organizational shutdowns and financial setbacks, and the changes and impacts to Mother Earth, where we could no longer deny that as a human on this earth, we do have impact. And to finally see that just come starkly through was kind of a real eye opener in these spaces, from pollution to just the fact of water scarcity and all types of resources. And even when we talk about resources in business, we're labeling humans as resources. And when we're talking about losing our elders and our knowledge keepers, those are resources that we will sorely miss and our students will miss. And so we've experienced the disparities in technology, including access to healthcare and continuing the education. But as I was speaking to my nieces, and I said, so you're telling me if you had access technology, you had the right computer, you knew how to use the technology to communicate with your educators, would you be okay today? And they said, no. So there's a lot of factors into just the one facet. We're hit with so many things. And I think fundamentally as a society, that social fabric and that impact of that is just unfathomable at this point. And so just being mindful of that going forward, and figuring out now how to adapt and move forward and find that resiliency that our ancestors had, to see them through those times that Dr. Kipp said, we've had so many challenges throughout history. They made it through, and we're going to make it through. And I think that's the message that we're so sorely needing right now. That is, we're going to be okay. We're going to move forward, and we're going to find a way. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Claw. Mr. MorningDove, can you share with us?
Um, a lot of what I've wanted to say has been said. However, I would like to, revisit those ideas. The main one being the loss of our elders. I think that now more than ever has shown the need for us to transition from a purely oral teaching style and to start putting them down in writing, putting them down in books, so that we don't have to risk losing so much information in such a short amount of time. Because with diseases like this, and this will not be the last of these kinds of diseases, our elders, those that hold that information, are always the most vulnerable. So if we can bring the knowledge that they keep into solid physical storage, I think that is a necessity. And the COVID pandemic is one of the most clear examples of that need. Because personally, I was never one who was the most steeped in tradition, and trying to look for those and trying to go out and look for people who can teach me these things, teach me the language, the culture, what I'm supposed to do, what I can't do. That has just become exponentially harder, because even those in my own family that I could go to are at risk or have already died. So I would say that our biggest challenge was losing all this information. And the next step forward would be to try to transition that into physical items. Now, from personal experience, I knew that the broadband issue was quite widespread. Even living here in the newer housing that my tribe has brought together, we still don't have very stable access to internet. And my tribe has done the best it can. It's given out Wi-Fi hotspots, computers to all of the households with children in them. But right at the start of the pandemic, when I was going to go back to college, these systems weren't in place yet, and so I had to either go to college in person or stay back and skip out on the year because I couldn't do it online. So from the personal experience, one of my biggest issues was trying to get the internet access that I needed in order to maintain and further my education.
Thank you. I think what we heard has been pretty powerful as far as the resilience. We have gone through similar things, and here we are still today. And we are going to still continue to be around. I am going to move on to the next question, and I am going to call out the different ones to answer this question. The next question is, what are the most crucial support our students and faculty need this summer to emerge strong from the events of the last year? I'm going to go to Dr. Gladstone, if you'd go first.
Thank you. So first, I admit personal weakness in preparing my thoughts here. Being an individual who sees problems through my academic and business-oriented conditioning. So I do risk appearing emotionally detached from the social problems I study. But yeah, they are very important problems that need to be addressed. And so listening to today's discussion so far and reflecting on Dr. Claus and Mr. MorningDove's statements they shared earlier, I see the most crucial support is emotional support. That is probably the greatest thing that we can offer, is that, our students need to know that these are challenging times for everybody. And it's especially, having been a student myself and having experienced certain things, and being a native student and my personal experiences with culture, the culture today is much different for the younger students that are, in terms of age, generations behind me. And the challenges they face are unique to them. And so it's very important that not only can the faculty and the staff, but the community needs to have a deep understanding about these challenges that our students are going through as they fulfill the call to serve their communities, to go out and get their education and come home and help them. There was a statement that Dr. Kipp shared earlier that, there's this concern amongst elders of her time and even today that, don't go out there because it's going to change you. But the community needs to recognize that, the many of these people, what I call, this education paradox, that a lot of these young students today are fulfilling a call to go out and help, get their education so that they could come back and help their communities. And the communities need to provide that support, to recognize the challenges that they undergo. The statement that, trying to learn online while dealing with, an argument at home at the same time. It's not easy to get an education. That, not only are we, we're not stepping away from our community, but we're stepping into a strange community that we have to balance and be able to work through these strange communities while maintaining our ties at home. So that I would say would be the greatest thing that can be offered, is that, not only do, as academics, we understand the challenges we go through, but the communities need to have a, great appreciation for the sacrifices that our students make as they prepare to gain knowledge that they want to use to help everyone at home.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Gladstone. Going from the mainstream university system, I'm going to switch over to tribal college perspective. Dr. Baker, can you answer the question?
Sure. I think that as far as moving forward, with the rapidity of how we've had to respond, I think one of the biggest things that we can give, and that I've seen on my campus, my team offering our students, is grace, quite honestly. That doesn't translate to being soft. That doesn't translate to being, a pushover by any means, but it does, to me, it means allowing them to see that the kind of the human side of all of this that's happening, and the fact that this is also impacting our faculty members, because we are a part of our communities. This is impacting everybody, our leadership, and therefore grace is first and foremost in my mind when I'm talking to my peers and to my colleagues on campus, and when we're dealing with students as well. You can almost see the relief on their face when you allow yourself to be human in their presence, when you let them know that you understand what they're talking about, what they're going through, and that we are attempting to get through this together, quite honestly. So it's easier to do than people think, I believe. It doesn't necessarily mean vulnerability. I know that some people kind of struggle with that, with being vulnerable in front of students and things, but it's a question of humanity, quite honestly. We are relatives. If we are going to state that as one of our values, then we ought to practice it in our daily lives. So give your students some grace.
Thank you, Dr. Baker. Dr. Claw, can you answer that same question, please?
Thank you. I apologize. Yes. When I was thinking about this question, I was really thinking about stability. We have had our foundation shaken so much that I'm looking at how to stabilize, to regather, to re-implement some environments that are familiar to students, to faculty, to everyone. And as we are coming to understanding that vaccinations are successful. Maybe this as actually an opportunity for us to do this, to bring back and facilitate the stability in the education system where it's helpful for everyone to find a settled, calm, steady way forward. And Shema, my mother, there's she would say, "Hashtoit audole, nostrit de hola," and she would say that the way is forward only, and how to move forward and how to overcome adversity and to persevere and to find that resiliency. You have to find stability, and so that stems from your own thought first. Hajo, think about it thoroughly, think about it critically, and then find the path that will allow you to move forward with stability. And so that's what I was thinking of as I was thinking about this question. What is it that our students and faculty need? And that's my mom and my brain helping me find that stability in order for me to found my grounding in that foundation. And so I think we can use that to say, how do we facilitate the beginning of a new period of healing through spirituality and ceremony, so that we do find that support and that fundamental foundation for our students as we move forward. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Claw. Dominik, what would be the most crucial support you would need this summer to emerge strong?
Sorry, I didn't hear that last part.
The most crucial support our students need this summer to emerge strong from the events of this past year.
Okay. The thing that I've been thinking about through this time is thinking of ways to bring our communities back together, because for the past year, we've all been so almost afraid of being together as a community. So one of the biggest support structures that I could think of is figuring ways for not only the children, but for the adults to also come together, either virtually or not, so that we can rekindle that sense of community and that sense of togetherness that we've all been lacking for this past year. And I also think that we should also be helping our teachers in that. From my experience, most of my teachers had never really done an online class before, and still had issues with it even coming to the end of this last semester. So providing our teachers with extra support with technology, online learning, and extra training in that area, and maybe even including it in like some of our educational degree curriculum, how to run an online class and how to foster learning in a digital environment, especially as we move to the future where most things are online and most things can be taught and spread online.
Thank you, Dominik. Dr. Kipp?
I think as we move in towards the summer, we can't be so focused or driven in our communities and in our tribal colleges and with our youth, because we've got to come together, but we've got to heal. And, quite frankly, the multiple traumas that Natives have endured over a history of 500 years have never been, we have never been given the opportunity to heal. So now's our time. Now's our time to put in functions and work and programming that brings people together with the intent purpose of healing. And we can do what our ancestors were not afforded. And we have that resilience that our ancestors moved through without having an opportunity to heal. We now have that opportunity. Think of what that could bring to us if we're allowed to heal from the trauma of COVID, if we're allowed to heal from multiple losses, if we're allowed to heal from a change in lifestyle. What could that do to us if we come together collectively in our institutions and create curriculum, create work, create dialogue, and most importantly, create ceremony around healing? And I say create ceremony because sometimes those ceremonies have been gone. And that doesn't mean we can't do something like that or we can mimic. We can always find that. And so now's an opportunity as we come back in, for Blackfeet, the thunder happened just recently. When the thunder happens, everything wakes up. It's Creator's voice saying, wake up, winged ones, wake up, animals, wake up, earth ones. And so we're waking up and we're waking up and we can wake up to heal and we can wake up to move too. And Creator gave us everything. Our ancestors gave us resilience, and now it's time for us to collectively come together and pull it through the summer.
Great words. I'm going to transition into a question. I'm going to skip a couple of questions because I think that's a good lead in. I'm going to ask the question. I'm going to go with you first, Dr. Baker. What are the strengths of our culture and heritage that we call on right now to be the most resilient leaders possible?
Oh my goodness, we have so much. I point to things, phenomena like the fact that Native people are outstripping everybody in regards to vaccination rates, and with how quickly they're getting vaccinated. I point to the fact that to me, that's evidence of community care. The fact that we have this sense of responsibility back to the community, and that's a cultural moray for lots and lots of tribes. I don't want to speak necessarily pan-Indian or anything by any means, but it's definitely a cultural moray or a thread that I've seen across tribes across the country, that it's not necessarily about the individual, it's more about the individual as a function of a larger being. We are a part of something, therefore we are responsible to those other people. And that is not a burden, it's a privilege. It is absolutely a privilege to be a part of something that is bigger than oneself. And the privilege of that is the fact that we rely upon each other to take care of each other. And those structures were built very specifically to respond to what we're going through right now, to respond to crisis. It's the reason why we have clans and that we acknowledge our clans when we introduce ourselves. I'm a water buster, and my clan Miripari, we have a responsibility to the rest of the tribe in our ceremonies and in our songs, our meetings and things. We had a responsibility to the rest of the tribe. And our clan kinship systems, our kinship systems, period, were extended family, which were all a function of a community in and of itself. So your community is your extended family. And what are you going to do for your family? You're going to take care of them. So that, I feel, has come to the forefront, and mainstream media is talking about it without even knowing that that's what they're talking about. The fact that we are taking care of each other as rapidly as we possibly can because there's a threat. We recognize the threat and we're responding to it. So our tribes, our nations, our cultures all had medicine built in as well to deal with things like mental health issues and grief. And a lot of that has been a little bit delayed or stunted because of the fact that we have to keep apart from each other. But I've seen so many amazing things even within my own community. I know my tribe reinstituted the camp crier. We have a camp crier who drives through our community, and on a loudspeaker, he's singing songs, he's saying prayers, he's doing things that encourage the overall community. And that was a traditional teaching. So we've reached back into our memory as one of the few populations to have lived through a deadly pandemic, like almost extinction level event. And we've reached back into that cultural memory and pulled some of that strength to help us right now with our dealing with the pandemic in and of itself. So there's so much strength there. There's so much that we can tap into, and we can teach other nations, other people about as well.
Thank you, Dr. Baker. Dr. Claw, asking you the same question.
Thank you so much, Dr. Baker. That's really a great perspective, because I think I have a similar one in thinking in particular really about just the fundamental indigenous teachings of ceremony and spirituality, and all those come through strength as a community, leaning on each other. And as you were speaking, I was kind of thinking about, some of those admonishments my mom would make, and she would say, which means that if you are not self-aware and you're thinking only of yourself, someday you might find yourself in deep trouble, and you will have no community around you to help you. And so that came to mind as you were speaking about, this deep connection, interconnectedness that we have as Native communities. And there's so much reliance on each other. We even ask for donations from our relatives when, we have a loss. When we have ceremonies, we reach out to our communities and families to come help us. And all of this strength comes through as a community. That care is that kinship that runs deep, and that flows through that line of clanship. And so being able to reach back into those and find that fundamental teaching as a way to remind ourselves that maybe we haven't been doing our renewal ceremonies. So this little life form of a virus kind of set us back in our place to remind us humanity is not at the top of the food chain. We are part of a system that we are interconnected with so many other things, that this tiny, tiny life form can bring us to a halt and remind us what's fundamental. And that is our teaching, our spiritual ways in our family, in our communities, and that we are part of Mother Earth. We have so much connected to us that we have to remember all of those things and reincorporate that into our classrooms. And I think that for me, it's different because I am in a Native serving institution, but I'm also in the School of Business Administration. So that's a very different place for me, I think. But fundamentally, when I decided to go down this journey, I decided that I wanted to be in a space where I was not preaching to the choir, that when I taught business ethics, that I input some of my Native values and perspectives and worldview to when my last class. I intentionally did this, and the faces of my class were so intently focused on me, it scared me just a little bit, like they're actually listening to me. And so this is valuable knowledge that is valid, as we know, because we live it, we use it. and it's reliable because our ancestors relied on it. And so just really focusing back on that indigenous teachings is what I would say is really kind of the foundation of where we could get started again, the ceremonies, the spirituality, to get that healing started. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Dr. Claw. With respect to time, I'm going to go ahead and switch to another question here. Dominik, this question is for you. What are the things most needed in the next academic year to help students?
In the next academic year, definitely a strengthening of our digital infrastructure, expanding, the Wi-Fi range, connectivity to houses and households, speeding that connection up as much as we can, which will not only help us now, but also help us long-term as the world continues turning. But also at least for college students, extra assistance in getting the materials required, textbooks, passcodes, keys, things like that, because a lot of people haven't been able to work, haven't been able to earn a lot of money during these past times, especially with some tribes like myself in implementing curfews and restricting all access after a certain point. So financial assistance for schooling, the digital infrastructure is absolutely necessary, and a little extra emotional support in that, at least from what I have seen, a lot of people don't like to talk about what their issues are. So providing people, students especially, as some of us transition back into in-person studying, that extra support so that we can talk and we can not go into the next year overly stressed and then add additional worry of classwork and deadlines on top of that. And also counseling for people who have experienced losses, especially since I know my family, we haven't been able to gather for funerals for people who have passed because of the COVID restrictions, and the members of that family's household not being safe to be around. So definitely counseling for people who have had losses.
Thank you, Dominik. I'm going to switch to another question. This question is directed to Dr. Kipp. We know that they talk about the new normal, but I don't think there's a new normal. Their environment changes all the time. So how are we going to transform? And then who would be the key partners to help us complete this transformation?
You know, David, I don't know what they mean when they say the new normal. I think that what we've experienced in this time of COVID is we not only experienced COVID, but we've seen significant renderings of racism. And that too has impacted our perception. So it's not like we've just been hit with COVID. We've been hit with racism. And if COVID and racism, pre-COVID and racism is the normal, then we don't want the normal. And I think now comes the time for Indigenous institutions and Indigenous people to step up and develop their normal. Our normal is grounded in Mother Earth. And we all know that there's been significant changes to our mother because people weren't consuming the products and the gas and the energy, and our mother rested. And so I think that the new normal is our indigenous ways of doing, being, and thinking. That there is no new normal. What we need to do is we need to slow down, listen to our ancestors, take in our teaching, and come together to create a normal that's collective for us. We have an opportunity to make a normal that works for us. We have an opportunity to make a normal that addresses lack of access to quality health care and racism and systematic racism. And so my hope is we don't go back to the normal. My hope is we create a world evolved from our ancestors and from our indigenous teachings.
Thank you, Dr. Kipp. Dr. Gladstone, would you chip in here?
I had some original thoughts on this from our earlier kind of like preparatory discussions, but kind of listening to the discussions right now, and especially this part about normal. What is normal? Who defines normal? I'm going to get really philosophically nerdy here. I'm a professor. I guess that's what we do for a living. Is that what exactly is normal, and what is a lot of people talk about traditions and traditional, and that's not traditional, and that's not our way. But the thing about what is, to extend what Dr. Kipp said, what is our normal way about being Native is that we're very flexible. We're very resilient. We adjust. One of the greatest expressions of our ability to be flexible and adjust is the very word Indian time. When we say Indian time, it's not that someone is running late. It means that we're patient and we're not set to a certain way, that we can adjust to the moment and we can persist in that moment. There was a lesson that Dr. Kipp also added earlier. She talked about creativity. And this also extends to what I heard from Dominik earlier about creativity, is that we need these certain things and we need these solutions. And how do we communicate? How do we use technology? And Dr. Baker said something that really has been stuck in my mind, is this concept of the town crier, this modern town crier who uses this modern speaker system, if I understood correctly what she said. And so that's the thing that we have as our strength. Our greatest strength is the fact that we have this identity, this historical identity of who we are, but at the same time, we're able to adjust it in the morning, or not in the morning, but in the moment, to be able to adapt to all the things, the challenges we face, and to be successful in that adaptation. And primarily just being very open-minded. Again, back to Indian time, it's being open-minded to other people's needs and their accommodations, and then working within that moment. So that's where I see what really works for us is just this fact of being creative and finding our solutions and being creative with our time.
Thank you, Dr. Gladstone. I want to thank Global Mind Ed and this esteemed panelists for allowing me to be your panel leader. I want to thank you again, and I'll turn you back over to Carol to close this out.
Thank you so much. It's been incredible to spend this time with you all. And I have to say that I have such a reverence and respect for Native American culture. And I think that the relational, the sacred, all of the things that we've been discussing for this hour is not just what the nation needs right now, but what the world needs to heal at the deepest level possible across multiple kinds of things that really have to heal now and for the future. So I just want to say it's been such an honor to be with you all, and maybe we can set up some other things, quarterly, or maybe even every few months, because I think the most important thing is to connect with Dominik and all the different people who are like Dominik, have their voices at the table, because they can help us co-create these solutions. And I think in so many instances, whether it's colleges or K-12 or companies, the voice of the younger people are not included to help us co-create, figure this out. So this is a really critical part of Global Minded, and we just look forward to really shifting that perspective with you. So all of those voices and perspectives are included, and including the ones of the wisdom keepers and the elders that you've lost so many of this year, that we can bring those insights to the table as well. So just looking forward to feedback from you all and how you see the Global Minded community being able to support your goals and your mission, and for all of us to work together as uncommon collaborators, I say, to really close the equity gap. So thanks to all of you. And I wish I could speak beautifully like Carma does, her beautiful language. And thank you again. We'll have the link, the recorded link to share with you all. It'll be in the newsletter tomorrow. And then we'll send it to each of you so that you can go ahead and share that with your different networks of people who weren't free during this time, but would benefit from watching it in their own time. And of course, with students, we want to share it widely when they're not always at colleges where they see themselves in those who are teaching them. So thank you so much for everything. It's just been such an honor and a privilege to be with all of you. And we are looking forward to just this being a launch of more ways that this leadership group can work together over time. Thank you so much. And for all your great planning, David, as well. But thanks to each of you. Take care. Bye-bye.